Today we will be working on lesson 4.4b. Basically, this is more applications on radical expressions. We'll be using some rules like when it comes to perimeter and area. So I might ask you any of those, but I will not provide you with the rules. So you need to be able to know the perimeter and area of a square, the perimeter and area of a rectangle, the perimeter and area of a triangle, and the volume of rectangular prism. So let's start with number 1. Find the perimeter and area of a rectangle with dimensions of 3 radical 2 minus 2 inches by 4 radical 2 plus 1 inches. Label your answers. So the length is a 3 radical 2 minus 2. And let's say, the width would be 4 radical 2 plus 1. Now, when it comes to perimeter, remember, the perimeter of a rectangle is 2L plus 2W. So 2 times the length, let's say in this case it's 3 radical 2 minus 2, plus 2 times the width, which is 4 radical 2 plus 1. And remember, this is the perimeter. In order to be able to find the perimeter, you need to simplify it. So you distribute the 2. You get 2 times 3 is a 6 radical 2. And then again, 2 times negative 2 would be a negative 4. And you do the same thing over here. So it would be 2 times 4 is an 8 radical 2 plus 2 times 1, which is a 2. Now if you can simplify, go ahead and simplify. 6 radical 2 and 8 radical 2 together would be 14 radical 2. And then negative 4 and plus 2 together would be negative 2. In this case, the perimeter of this rectangle would be 14 radical 2 minus 2. Now to find the area, what you need to do is to multiply L times W. So the L, let's say it's 3 radical 2 minus 2, and the width in this case is 4 radical 2 plus 1. Again, you need to simplify your answers, so you need to distribute. Now it would be a good time to pause the video and try to finish the answer for this one. Now let's do this together. So as you can see, we have to multiply the 3 times the 4, you get 12. And then the radical 2 times the radical 2, you would get a 2. Remember, radical 2 times radical 2 would be just 2. Then you multiply 3 radical 2 by 1, so you get 3 radical 2. Then you would multiply negative 2 times 4 radical 2. You would multiply the constants. So negative 2 times 4 would be a negative 8 radical 2. And then negative 2 times 1 would be just negative 2. Now 12 times 2, you can rewrite this as 24. So let's combine like terms. 24 and the negative 2 would be a 22. And 3 radical 2 minus 8 radical 2 would be a negative 5 radical 2. And that would be the area after multiplying the length times the width. Now let's look at the second problem. Find the area of an equilateral triangle with a height of 3 radical 5 plus 2 and a base of a 4 minus 2 radical 5. So the height, which is this one, is 3 radical 5 plus 2. And the base, in this case, is 4 minus 2 radical 5. Now remember, the area of a triangle is a half BH. So go ahead, find B times H, which is basically 3 radical 5 plus 2, times 4 minus 2 radical 5. After you find the answer, don't forget to divide the answer by 2. So multiply B times the height, the base and the height, and then divide by 2. So take some time, do the work on your own, then share your work with your group members. Then play the video again to check your answer. I hope you took your time to find it. Remember, only with practice you would be really good at radicals, and math takes practice. So let's try the first one. So 3 times 4 is 12 radical 5. And then 3 times, or radical 5 times negative 2 radical 5. So 3 times negative 2 is a negative 6. And radical 5 times radical 5 is a 5. Now let's do the 2. 2 times 4 is an 8. And then 2 times negative 2 radical 5. Remember, you multiply the 2 times the negative 2. So you get negative 4 radical 5. Now 12 radical 5 minus 6 times 5 is a 30. Plus 8 minus 4 radical 5. Then, after you FOIL, you go ahead and combine like terms. So 12 radical 5 and minus radical 5 would be 8 radical 5. Negative 30 plus 8 would be negative 24. Or basically negative 22. I'm trying to erase, but I don't think I'll be able to do that. It's going to erase everything, so let me just cross that and write negative 22. So the final answer would be 8 radical 5 minus 22. Now let's move on to number 3, find the volume of the square prism. To do that, you have to multiply the area of the base times the height. Now it looks like a square because they said it's a square prism, so this is a square. So it's going to be 2 radical 3 by 2 radical 3. And the height is 5 radical 7. So to find the volume of this prism, you have to multiply. You have to find the area of the bottom, which is the square. So it's going to be 2 radical 3 times 2 radical 3. And then you multiply it by a height, which is in this case 5 radical 7. So remember, the volume of a prism is going to be the area of the base times the height. And the area of the base in this case, since it's a square, it's going to be S times S. So let's work on this. Now to do something like this, you can multiply 2 radical 3 by 2 radical 3 and then multiply whatever answer you get by 5 radical 7, or you can just do it across. So let's do this. It's easier. 2 times 2 times 5, so you multiply all the constants, all the numbers or coefficients together. You would get 20. Because 2 times 2 is a 4, times 5 is 20. Now you can have a bigger radical and multiply all those radicals together. So 3 times 3 is a 9. Times 7 would be 63, so it's going to be the square root of 63. You can think of it this way. Or you can notice that radical 3 times radical 3, if you do that, then the radical will drop and you will be left with just 3. So it would be 2 times 3, it goes out of the radical, and you'll be left with just radical 7. So in this case, it would be 60 radical 7. Let me do this again. So 2 times 2 is 4, times 5 is 20. And then you notice that it's radical 3 times radical 3, so the radical will just drop, and the 3 goes out of the radical. And then you will be just left with the radical 7, so the final answer is 60 radical 7. Now let's go back to, so this is basically how to find the volume. Now let's go back to the things that we've done so far. Now we've been asked to label our answers. So whenever we find the inch, remember that the perimeter is going to be in inch. The area is going to be in inch square. Keep that in mind. Now if you move on, also we're asked to label our answer, but they didn't give us a unit, so you can say that the perimeter or the area is going to be units square. Now the volume is going to be units cube. Since we're multiplying 3 things together, so it's a cube. The area, since we are multiplying 2 things together, it would be a square, but the perimeter we are adding, so it would be just inch. So that is for 3b, or 4.4b, operations with radical expressions. Remember, you're supposed to be knowing those formulas by the quiz or a test. You are supposed to do 4.4b practice and turn it in for a grade on Friday. But if you're done with this earlier, you can start on 4.4a and 4.4b practice. They are due for a grade on Friday, so you can start it in class today and finish it on Friday, but do not take it as homework. Remember, you need to turn it in for a grade on Friday. So I hope you have a wonderful day and see you next Tuesday.